Hey, welcome back to my little channel, and thank you for joining me once again for a drawing tutorial. So in this series, we've been really focusing in on the face. We started with the Loomis method to kind of go over the basic construction of the head, and then we've looked at how to draw the eyes and the nose from various different positions. So today, we're going to be actually focusing in on the lips. I'll be going over some common mistakes that I've seen so that you can avoid those little pitfalls. And then I'm going to show you how to draw them from the front, from the side, as well as a 3/4 view. Okay. I'll be using generic lips for the size and the measurements just to simplify the process. But remember that when you're actually drawing your own, whether you're doing stylized or whether you're doing a portrait, make sure that you pay attention to the differences because it's the differences that makes our lips unique. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and get started with the main lesson, and I'll see you on the other side of the break. All right, so before we start working on the lips, let's take a look at some common mistakes that I've seen, and then we'll take a look at how to correct them. One of the more common ones that I've seen is making the lips very flat. And you're trying to make the face look three-dimensional, and then you put flat lips on it. It kind of takes away from the entire feel of the drawing. The second one that I see all the time is drawing the lips with heavy outlines and then not blending them. When you do this, it tends to look like the lips have been pasted onto the drawing rather than blended into the surrounding areas. So you got to make sure that when you are drawing, draw them very softly and then render them and blend them into the surrounding area. And then a third common mistake is the placement and the size, okay? Sometimes I see students that put the lips super close to the nose and there's no room here for the philtrum, or they make the lips almost the same size as the nose. Our lips are bigger than the nose, so we have to take that into account. And then another one that I see often is putting the nose and the lips too far down, and then there's no room here for the chin. And then in this case here, you can see the lips are way too wide in relationship to this nose right here. So placement and size have to be dealt with before the rendering takes place. All right, so let's deal with this flat situation first. When we look at the skull, we know that the teeth are not going straight across. They go back into the mouth. And when you look at it from the side, you can also see that they protrude out. So the way to represent that is through a barrel, so not a cylinder. This would be your typical cylinder here, but you got to remember that it's also coming out this way. So it forms like a barrel, okay, the barrel of the mouse, if you want to call it that, okay? And then this is from a front view here. And then the teeth, they go around, right? And if we could see all of the teeth, they would keep going back into the mouth like so, okay? But remember, the lips only, just like the eyelids, they only cover a portion of the mouth. The rest of it is inside of the skull. So the upper teeth would be here, the lower teeth would be here, and then the chin would be down here somewhere, okay? So when we draw the lips, we got to get this feel like it's going around, and then it flattens out like so into the cheek area, okay? So this would be a front view. So imagine this vertical line coming this way, and the horizontal line would have a slight curve, okay? Now, let's go ahead and place in a rhythm line here. This would be where the philtrum is. And then when we come and we make the flaps of the mouth, we're going to come down and then fade them into where the mouth disappears, like so. And then you do the same thing on the other side. So you're coming down and then back, down, back, disappear. Now the upper lip overlaps the bottom lip a little bit, and we often see this little piece here, I think they call it the Cupid's bow, and this will overlap the bottom lip. So you want to get that in there, okay? And then the bottom lip goes across. It's got a nice little round to it. And then it comes up, and then it fades also into this return area right here. So up and return. So you want to make sure that this line in particularly feels like it's going around the face, not straight across. Now, when we look at it from the side, so let me go ahead and draw another barrel here. So if this was a side view, then this would be the teeth going back into the skull. This up here would be where the nose would be. And then the lips come out, right? The upper lip comes out, and then it goes in. And then the bottom lip comes out, and then back in again. Then you have this space here, and then you have the chin. Now, when you look at the lips from the side, just like with the eyelids, they're not going to go all the way to the back of the mouth. They're only covering a small section of this. So this is going to come here and probably stop right about here. So the upper lip will do something like this. Okay, not straight, but it's got like a little curl that feels like it's going around, like so. And then the lower lip, make sure that this overlaps a little bit. And then the lower lip goes this way. And then we blend it into this little depression area and then the top of the chin here. When we look at the mouth from a 3/4 view, we have to establish the angle. And most of the time, we like to work from the center. But for me personally, when I'm working with the lips, I actually try to find the two end pieces first. And that helps me establish the angle. Then I'm going to figure out where the center piece is. And remember that it's going to come out and then back in into the philtrum. So imagine that the nose is up here. Then this piece here is going to go down and around to the return, depending on how full that person's lips are. And then this one, because it's in 3/4 view, it's going to look a lot smaller. So it might do something like this. So this overlaps this overlaps this, okay? And then the bottom lip is going to come out this way. And because the face is turned, or the mouth is turned, it's not going to go directly there. It's actually going to create more of a rounded area here, and then it curls over like so. But on this side, because it's closer to us, it's going to look more like this. So anytime you're doing a 3/4 view, it's kind of a combination of the profile and the front view. So for a 3/4 view lip, it might look something like that. And then the little depression underneath is going to come this way. Right, so it's going this way, this way, this way, this way, and then the nose. Okay. So you got to think of it as the individual forms. What are the forms doing? Don't just go straight across. Don't just go straight across like this and make it flat. You got to think about how the forms are bending around the barrel of the mouse. The second one is heavy outline. So the biggest thing that I can tell you about that is you got to soften up the pressure. So don't go in there like you're writing. Hold your pencil sideways and use very, very light pressure. And try not to have too sharp of a tip. I keep this particular tip a little bit blunt so that it doesn't like scratch the paper. So I can draw very soft lines just by varying the pressure. And what you're hearing is actually my fingernails, is not the paper or the pencil scratching the paper. So it's very, very, very soft pressure. So no matter what you're drawing, this helps with two things. Number one, this is going to be much easier to blend out. And because we're not scratching the paper, it is like super, super easy to rub it out and not leave any of the ghost images. All right, so the next thing that we want to take a look at is the placement and or the size of the mouth. Okay? So I'm going to show you a couple of different ways of figuring that out. So let's assume that you have the proportions already figured out for the nose and the base of the chin, either with the Loomis method or the Riley method. So if you have this in place, you can either split this into thirds, like so, to establish the top of the mouth and more or less where the top of the lip, and then more or less where the bottom of the lip's gonna go, okay? And then for the width of the mouth, it's generally about 2 eyes wide, okay? So if you have the eyes already drawn out, you could do that, or you can just take a small sheet of paper, measure the nose, since the nose and the eyes are supposed to be the same average width, and you can mark that there to figure out how wide the mouth is going to be. So now we kind of know that the mouth is going to fit in this area right here. And we have our center line, and then we can start drawing it in, okay? So now let's say that you're trying to draw this, but you don't have these measurements. Well, what you could do to get a guesstimate is first measure the width of the nose and then turn it sideways like so and mark it. Now this is actually more or less where the base of the lower lip's gonna go, okay? Not the upper lip, okay? And then you can kind of base it off of that. So this nose is much bigger than that, so that's why this looks much bigger here. So here's my center line. Here's the Cupid's bow. And then we can use that same measurement to figure out how wide it should be, roughly. Okay, so another way that you could do this, if you have the size of the nose established, you can use the Riley system. So if you know where the base of the nose is here, and you have that same equal distance here, go up about a third. So if we split this into 3, like so, from the top of the ball, create a rhythm to this third right here. And that will give you the muzzle of the mouth right here. And then if you take from the base of the chin and you create another rhythm and let it overlap this one here, that will tell you more or less where the bottom of the lip's going to be. And then you build it up from there. All right, so if you're trying to add the lips on a face that's tilted or turned in perspective, then you can't use these measurements. You have to alter them just like we did when we did the nose and stuff. But we can still use proportions. So I'm going to split this into 3, and that's going to establish where the top of the lip's going to be, more or less where the bottom of the lip's going to be, and then we're going to figure out the width by using the eyes and the nose. So let's say that the center of the mouth is going to be about here. And the center of the eyes are here. So that'll tell me where this is going to end, roughly there. Okay. Now, the Cupid's bow, we know that the lips are got to come out this way. So this is going to come out here, off center. And then this will come this way, just like in this example that we did here. Okay. So that's going this way around, and then there's the return, and the little nodes right there. And then this one, because it's in perspective, we're not going to really see it going up very much. We're basically just going to see more or less where this ends here. And this will dip down just a little bit, right? Because the top lip's going to overlap the bottom lip, okay? And then for the lower lid, it's going to come out, right? So we got to make sure that we bring this out because that tells us our new center line. We're not using this one. That'll make it flat. So we got to bring it out this way. And now we know that this is going to come like so. Okay. And then here's that little depression area right there. And then the chin will be here. And then the rest is just a matter of, rendering it properly with the shading. All right, so the last thing that I want to talk about today is the planes of the lips, right? Because knowing how the planes are moving will help you with the shading or the painting or the value. It's easier to see from the side view, but I'll also show you here on the front view. Imagine that we have a light source up here somewhere. Typically, when you're looking at portraits, the light is coming from somewhere on the top. We can see that this plane is kind of tilting away from the light here. So it's not going to capture as much light as this one here. That's why the upper lip, generally speaking, looks a little bit darker than the lower lip. The lower lip is coming out, so it's going to definitely catch a lot more light, like so, okay? The philtrum is coming out, so it's going to catch some light. And of course, the nose is coming out. The indentation underneath the lips is going in, just like the top lip, so this will be in shadow, right, because it's going this way. And then this one is coming out again, so you're going to get some highlight on the chin, okay? So if I were to put planes on it, or cross contours, these will be going this way. These will be going this way, then this way, and then this way. Okay, and that will help you figure out how to do the shading, which areas are going to be in light and which areas are going to be in shadow. From the front view is not quite as easy, okay? So we know you got to think of it kind of like steps. So you have step here, then down, then out again, then down. So the parts that are coming out are going to capture light, and the parts that are going down are going to be in shadow, okay? So if you think about it, this part is coming out this way and this way. So I'm just going to indicate it coming this way, okay? So this is going to capture more light than this, right? Because this is going inward, like you see here, okay? So it's going inward. And then this lip comes out again, and then it tucks under. So all of this would be in shadow. And then wherever the top of the chin is, that's starting to come out again. So when you're shading, you have to think about how the light is going to affect each plane, okay? Doesn't matter whether it's a front view or three-quarter view. Three-quarter view is a little bit easier to see. So let's put the light source on this side this time. And I'm just going to represent it. Actually, I'm going to do it with the lighter pencil. I'm going to represent it with cross contours first. It's going to come this way. Now, this little guy sticks out more than these do. So this is going to turn even more. more of a curve. But then here it's going to flatten out. Okay, so this way. And I like to use cross contours on the lips because our lips are textured, and a lot of times it's good to see some of these lines underneath the shading. Now, this lip, the bottom lip, which is made up of 2 parts, I should have mentioned that, 2 parts for the bottom lip and then 3 parts for the upper lip, okay? These are gonna come this way. Right, they're coming around. And then for the barrel of the mouth here, this is coming kind of like a ramp this way. And then these are going this way. And then the philtrum is like a little depression here. So like a little dip, okay? And then the chin comes out. So if you could imagine what each one of these planes is doing here, then when it's time to start shading, it's very easy to figure things out. So for example, I'm just gonna do a little bit of this, and I might put it through on speed mode. Right here, we know that this upper lip is gonna be a little bit darker. And I'm gonna follow these cross contour lines. I'm not gonna like make it super dark, but I need to make sure that it's gonna be darker than the bottom. This one here is separate from the first one. So I'm gonna continue to do this right here, but I'm gonna have a little highlight here because this one sticks out a little bit more than that one. So I'm gonna kind of like plan for that. And then on this side, I'm gonna continue that, but I'm imagining since this sticks out, that there's probably gonna be a little bit stronger shadow here where the 2 meet. As it goes this way, since it's going back into the face, this is actually going to get darker, right? Because you're going further and further away from that light. Not only because it's going this way, but it's also going back. Up here, it can be a little softer. A little extra shadow right there. For the bottom, it's going to be the opposite. It's going to start off dark, right, where the 2 lips meet. But then there's going to be highlight here. You can see where this part here is kind of flat before it starts to go down. So we know that this, it's got to have a little bit of highlight. So I'm going to start coming this way and following the cross contours. Keeping the bottom lip just a little bit lighter than the top. There'll be like a white, I don't want to call it a highlight, but it'll be a lighter tone. So let me put this here for a minute. Now, you have to be careful if you do this. It doesn't show up on everybody. But if you're gonna use this, you have to be careful not to create a white outline, right? Because that's just as bad as a black outline. So you have to kind of like pick and choose where you're gonna see that. And you want to keep it soft, right? Because it's, when you do see it, it's very, very narrow. It'll look kind of like that. And then since this is coming down this way, this area here will be a slightly darker than up here. And I would just continue that following the cross contours. Now, eventually you get to the point where you don't need the cross contours anymore because you can visualize them. But if you are struggling adding your shadows to your drawings or your paintings, go ahead and throw in some cross contours and kind of identify what the planes are doing. And then once you got the planes figured out, it's much easier to determine how the light's going to affect the planes. And there's a lot of different planes on the human face. All right, so that'll do it for this week's episode. Please let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you need help or if you need clarification, let me know. All right, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next episode.